both sides of the pond.
We now welcome in our other weekly guest, Max Torres of Ducks Digest, joining us in the Oregon Man Clicks hotline. You're listening to the Jerry's Home Improvement Game Day Show. And Max, once again, another week. Thank you for taking the time away to join us once again.
No problem at all, Ryan. You know, I'm always game to talk some Ducks recruiting, so always fired up to be here. Thanks for having me.
And it really seems like the last few weeks, Oregon has really ramped it up in terms of their recruiting efforts. I know that's a big overarching statement there, but how has Oregon started to put their pedal more on the metal in the last few weeks in terms of their recruiting?
Yeah, I think part of it really starts, obviously, with some of these commitments that they've been able to get since we just spoke a week ago, Ryan, so I know we're going to hit on some of those guys, but I think a lot of it starts with the work that they've put in behind the scenes. You know, Oregon had that bye week before they faced UCLA, and they spent it very wisely, you know, just getting out to see a lot of their top targets, that some of them have already been on campus, and, you know, taking it a step further, be like, all right, you came to see us, now we're going to show you that love and, you know, go out to see you and show you that you're a priority. You know, those days during the bye week are so crucial and so valuable. So they're, you know, definitely putting the miles on the airline cards, so to speak. And then just showing those guys that they're still heavily recruiting them. So just making sure that, you know, they use that time wisely. And obviously they're pushing ahead into 2024 as well. So juggling the two classes in 2023 and 2024 while also managing, you know, the on-field product it takes a full team effort. So definitely got to give a lot of props to those guys behind the scenes as well as the coaches who are taking the time to go see these players.
Yeah, some exterior factors help that as well. The bye week, along with the top 10 matchup coming up the following week. You mentioned 2 weeks ago, I believe, was Coach Lachlan who went down to Mississippi to see Dante Dowdell. There was another coach who went over towards the Maryland area to recruit there. Whether it be the bye week recruiting or whether it be the top 10 matchup at Autzen Stadium and the recruiting that goes in with that, have you seen any of the last 2 weeks sort of come to fruition with the Ducks, whether it be a commitment or a top 3, top 5, or any shift in the crystal ball, according to some of the various recruiting sites?
Yeah. So there's actually one guy that I talked to recently here in the 2024 class for Oregon. It's Fox Crater. He's a 6'6", 275-pound offensive lineman from Vancouver, Washington. He's actually originally from Texas, but he's playing at Evergreen High School in Vancouver, which is not too far away from Portland. I spoke with him about that visit for UCLA that he took. His actually his third visit of the season to Oregon. He was also in town for the BYU and Stanford games, and he just had a lot of really good praise for the staff and kind of about the vision that they have there. I was asking him, 3 visits to one school in one season, like that's not something you hear too often. And he was saying, they're showing the love for me, so I gotta, reciprocate that. And obviously he's very, very high on Oregon. A couple of other schools that are still looming large for him. You got USC and UW. But fortunately for Oregon, they got some momentum here in the 2024 class with AJ Pugliano hopping on board, 2024 tight end out of North Bend. But it's an encouraging time for Oregon that they're able to push ahead in the 2024 class, because I think that that's kind of a little bit of a gauge for how effectively a staff is recruiting when they're able to kind of turn that switch and be like, all right, we really like where we're at in 23. Now it's time to get some 2024 momentum rolling. And so they got that rolling with AJ Pugliano, who's an awesome tight end that's in-state, so crucial to get that in-state momentum. And take advantage of the talent that's in your own backyard if it is, to the caliber of a guy like AJ, where they believe he can, contribute at Oregon, since Oregon isn't necessarily a major powerhouse for recruiting talent. But then just kind of final thing with Fox, he told me he's actually already planning to be back in town for the Washington game, which is November 12th. That's the next home game for Oregon. So things are looking pretty good for Oregon as far as the 2024 recruiting class, getting that going. I was also able to stop in San Francisco yesterday to see Jerry Mixon, 2023 Oregon linebacker commit. Really cool to see him in person. It's kind of just a walkthrough day of practice. since they have a game today on Friday as we're talking here. But that guy's a special talent. I mean, I was talking to his coach. He was saying he just loves the versatility that he brings to the table. Oregon's taking him as a linebacker to kind of man that inside middle of the defense with Noah Sewell leaving. But Gary also comes off the edge. He plays some running back for the Irish. He also plays some quarterback even. So he is just a super, super versatile guy. Obviously, people probably recognize his last name, being the cousin of Joe Mixon, the running back for the Bengals, also out of the Bay Area. So I just love getting out there on the road and getting to see some of these Oregon commits and targets in person. So really, really fun stuff.
You mentioned Fox Crater and how he's taken multiple visits. I believe he's scheduled for 4 if he does come up for Washington this year. That must be a good sign for Oregon, right? When a guy comes up that many times in a year to visit one team.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I think this is one of those instances where geography is on Oregon's side. With a lot of the top tier guys that they go after, honestly, the geography doesn't usually play in their favor. If you've flown in and out of Eugene, you know that it can be a little difficult. Sometimes you got to jump through some hoops and even go to Portland sometimes and drive over. So I think that Oregon's in an awesome spot. I really like where they're at with Fox Crater here in the 24 class. And Adrian Clem's done a phenomenal job of late recruiting offensive linemen. So it wouldn't be too much of a surprise if he ultimately ended up at Oregon. But no concrete timeline right now is what he was telling me. But Oregon's certainly in a good spot there with USC and UW. Oregon State also in the picture there.
You brought up something earlier, and it got me to thinking, and you talked about Dan Lanning and his recruiting efforts. Mario Cristobal was always a great recruiter for Oregon in the sense that it seemed like top recruits always just sort of ended up with the Ducks. It feels like Dan Lanning is equally as good of a recruiter, but it feels like that's more in the forefront of the narrative around Dan Lanning, is that he's making those efforts to go out and get recruits. Maybe it's because he's a young coach. Maybe it's because he has a coaching staff that's bought into it as well. Not like Cristobal did, and that coaching staff obviously very bought into recruiting. But do you know why, or in your opinion, why the recruiting efforts of Dan Lanning seem to be more highlighted than Mario Cristobal, where I think they're getting equal level of recruiting, but it seems like Lanning's efforts are really being the ones that are highlighted?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities between the two as recruiters. I think with Mario Cristobal, obviously Miami was in the headlines just last night, landing the nation's top defensive recruit in Cormani McClain, who was an in-state guy out of in Florida. That was a huge headline for them, and Mario Cristobal gets mentioned quite a bit as a head coach. That you won't find too many head coaches that are as personally involved in recruitment as Mario is. But to talk about Lanning, I think one thing that made him special was just the second he got that job, Ryan, the timing of it was really tough, obviously. There were a lot of decommitments after Mario Cristobal announced that he would be taking that job in Miami. So the way that he was able to kind of get that class back together and finish on a strong note, I believe they were the top class in the Pac-12 after they got Josh Connerly over USC. That was huge. I thought that was really, a huge statement for him, just arriving, saying, hey, we're not going to slow down at all on the recruiting trail here. Obviously, everyone's heard about him calling Jaleel Florence as he was walking off the field following that national title win with Georgia. But yeah, I think he's doing a really good job of also staying just really involved with these recruits, even if it's, an offensive guy, for example. Like, you still want to have your hand in kind of all of these recruitments as much as you can. Getting time with those guys on their visits, going out to see them. We know that he was out in Detroit with Kenny Dillingham to see Dante Moore, the 5-star quarterback who's played for the Ducks. I think he's done a really good job of just not only getting the players to buy into the vision, but also the coaches. From the people that I've talked to around Oregon, that they're just really saying that it's different, but it's all still really effective. They can't give away too many of their secrets when they're talking to me, right? And certainly wouldn't be at liberty to say that on the phone here with you, Ryan. But they're just saying that everyone's really together. They're all bought in. The organization is next level. And it's a huge team effort, with all the guys that he brought to Oregon on this staff. Marshall Malco, one of the biggest names in recruiting. J.R. Malala is another big one who was a holdover from the previous staff. Can't overstate the importance of some of those guys working behind the scenes logistically, where coaches are at, when they're going to see these guys. Just all the organization that goes into it, I think is just pretty crazy, and you understand why these staffs are so big.
Max Torres of Ducks Digest joining us on the Oregon Man Clinics hotline. This game in California, are you going to be able to make it to Cal for the weekend?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I just flew into San Jose on Thursday morning, and I'll be at the Cal game. So it'll be an exciting time for sure.
Well, you'll need to give me a report on that when it's all said and done. Max, before we let you go, tell the listeners where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, appreciate that. You can find me on Twitter. That's where I'm the most active and will tweet out, my quickest updates. My username there is mtorresports. You can find me on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. Really been ramping up a lot of stuff over there. Podcasts, analysis, interview with Jerry Mixon is over there that I mentioned earlier. And you can find my podcast, Ducks Dish Podcast. Got a lot of stuff going on there. And then last but not least, you can find all of my written work over on ducksdigest.com. Those are the best places you can find me.
Thank you, Max. We always appreciate you joining us.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me, Ryan.